The most dangerous thing about agents is not that they can execute, it's that they no longer wait. Because for all the excitement around agents, autonomy, workflows, and AI productivity, there is a deeper shift happening underneath. The system is losing its pauses. And those pauses were doing more than slowing things down. They were giving us time to intervene. I don't say that theoretically. My background is in systems that execute, trading systems, automated rules, environments where a decision turns into consequence very quickly. And one thing you learn in those environments is this: speed does not forgive weak assumptions. If judgment is not carried into the system before it moves, the system will not magically discover that judgment later. It will simply execute what was installed, or expose what wasn't. That is why agents should make us pause, because the AI progression so far has been interpreted mostly as an upgrade path. First, better prompts, cleaner inputs, more precise instructions, say it better and the system responds better. Then workflows, connect the steps, chain the outputs, reduce manual effort, make execution feel more structured. Then automation, remove repetition, let the system run, free up time, increase throughput. And now agents. Systems that do not simply wait for the next instruction, but can decide, act, call tools, move across systems, and continue towards an outcome. That progression feels natural. It feels logical, almost inevitable. Each stage appears to give us more leverage, more scale, more capability, but hidden inside that progression was something most people mistook for inefficiency. Friction. The pauses, the handoffs, the seams, the annoying places where the system slowed down, stalled, broke, or needed attention. Those things look like weaknesses in the system, but some of them were also acting as protection. They gave people time to notice, time to question, time to stop something before weak judgment turned into visible consequence. That is the uncomfortable part. A lot of what we've called control may only have worked because the system was still slow enough for humans to rescue it. Agents change that completely. They don't simply extend execution. They remove the final delay between weak judgment and consequence. You don't have a control problem. You have a time problem. And once time disappears, something more uncomfortable gets exposed. The control many people thought they had was often never really there. It was delay, a pause between decision and outcome. A window where something could still be seen, adjusted, stopped, or pulled back. That window made systems feel governed, because someone could still step in, someone could still correct, someone could still interrupt the sequence. But interruption is not the same as authority. Interruption only works when the system still pauses long enough to be interrupted. Agents don't give you that same luxury. They move continuously. They embed decisions into execution. They turn action from a sequence of visible steps into an ongoing process, and consequence starts arriving with less and less delay. That is the real rupture. Agents collapse the intervention window. Before this, execution still had seams. A prompt took time. A workflow had handoffs. An automation would stall, break, or need attention. There were still places where the system revealed itself before it had gone too far. Those seams acted like a break, not by design, not because anyone had consciously built them as governance, but they were real. They slowed execution just enough for late judgment to keep pretending it was authority. That is the illusion agents expose. The market is reacting in predictable ways. More control planes, more guardrails, more oversight, more audit layers, more human-in-the-loop language. And I understand why. Those responses feel responsible, they feel mature, they sound like control. But most of them still assume there is a moment to step into, a gap, a pause, a delay between what the system decides and what the system does. That delay is disappearing. And once the delay disappears, the whole idea of adding control later starts to collapse. Control that depends on delay was never control. It was a recovery mechanism. Most systems were not governed at the point of decision. They were governed after the output, after the action, after something had already moved far enough to need review, approval, correction, or repair. That worked while execution still waited. Agents remove that condition. So when the system moves, it moves on whatever was already installed. The real assumptions, the real standards, the real judgments, the real gaps. Not the strategy deck, not the stated intention, not what people hoped the system would understand, what was actually built into it. And if judgment was not installed there, it does not suddenly arrive later. That is the part I think leaders need to sit with. Governance without time becomes observation. You can still see what happened, you can still measure it, you can still analyze it afterwards, but you are no longer governing it at the moment that matters. You are watching the consequence of whatever was allowed to move. This is where signal governance becomes non-optional. And I don't mean governance as review. I don't mean governance as more oversight after the fact. I mean judgment installed before the system moves. The standards, constraints, meaning, audience understanding, strategic boundaries, and authority logic the system must carry before it is allowed to act. Without a signal operating system, continuous execution does not become leverage. It becomes exposure. That is why agents are such a defining shift. They do not create the underlying issue. They reveal it. They do not create the chasm. They remove the friction that hid it. This is a subtractive shift more than an additive one. Yes, agents add capability, but more importantly, they subtract delay. And once delay disappears, the intervention window disappears with it. So the better question is not, how do we govern agents better? That question is already downstream. The better question is, what system did we allow to move without ever being capable of governing itself? Because once execution becomes continuous, the recovery moment starts to vanish. There is no clean pause, no natural catch, no reliable point where late judgment can safely enter and pretend it was there all along. There is only consequence, and whatever was installed before the system moved is what runs. That is the condition agents force onto the table. When execution becomes continuous, judgment must be pre-installed or it becomes irrelevant. This is not a preference. It is not a maturity model. It is not a best practice conversation. It is a constraint. And if you are the one designing these systems, implementing them, selling them, or advising clients on them, that lands differently. Because it removes the fallback, the comforting belief that you can catch it later, fix it downstream, adjust as it runs. That belief depended on time, and time was never control. It was just the last place control could still appear. This is the part I cannot unsee now. The chasm is not new. The friction that hid it is gone. And once that lands, the old conversation starts to feel inadequate. Better prompts won't solve this. Better workflows won't solve this. More governance after the fact won't solve this. Because governance applied after motion was never authority. It was recovery. and agents remove the recovery window.